Hey, Miss Gonzalez. My book is about Dunkirk, the history behind the major motion picture by Joshua Levine. So, firstly, about the author, right? So, Joshua Levine is the author of Dunkirk, the history behind the major motion picture. He was born in the Bahamas in April 9th of 1970. He majored in law in university, and in 1993, he was called to the bar in London, where he held the title of criminal barrister. He defended the innocent and the guilty in court for several years. After the years of working in law, he transitioned to acting, with jumps here and there, to even being an assistant producer at BBC Classical Music Television, which is really strange because who would believe that an author, historian, and actor would be an assistant producer, right? So, anyways, it was shortly after this that Joshua approached Ebury Press, which is a publisher in England, with the idea for his first book, and the rest is history from him. Some of his notable works are Dunkirk, the history behind the major motion picture, Beauty and Atrocity, People, Politics, and the Irish Conflict, On a Wing and a Prayer, the untold story of the first heroes of the air. So those are just some of his major books. Summary of the book, Dunkirk, right? So Joshua Levine, he really explores the remarkable story of the Dunkirk evacuation during World War II. And how he does this is by recounting the chaotic events of the Dunkirk evacuation in 1940, with over 338,000 soldiers evacuated, close to 350, and they were just trapped on the beaches of Dunkirk. Some of them were fleeing on small boats, big boats. They were getting sunken by U-boats, and it was just a really chaotic situation. They were completely surrounded by German forces, and through a combination of historical analysis, through information, and just describing the operation, he also includes first-hand accounts of the soldiers and of the civilians and of the politicians and military leaders who were involved in the evacuation. And some of them are fictional and some of them are real. Like one of the passages I'm about to read for the dramatic reading, it follows a story of a man who was involved with helping the soldiers escape. And so basically Joshua Levine, he paints a vivid picture of the evacuation, right? And from from the very hardcore military decisions behind the Operation Dynamo to the desperate struggle for survival by the soldiers. Um, the book examines the evacuation's broader significance and showcasing how it can become a symbol of unity and perseverance and hope for the Allies during one of the darkest times in one of the darkest periods of human history. So, some lessons learned from this book is it's a very important book, and it really broadened my perspective of the Dunkirk evacuation, and it really taught me a lot more than what my previous knowledge of the book was. And so my biggest takeaway from this book is that how Dunkirk wasn't just a military operation. It was a moment where a lot of people they got together, cooperated to make history and to save each other and themselves. It taught me about endurance, teamwork, and how even in desperate situations and dark times that if we got together, we became uniformed, united, and we can ultimately flip the tables around into success. And that is what the book taught me. Some other things the book showed me is that Dunkirk, it wasn't a straight victory, but a miracle escape. I learned how civilians risked everything, sailing into dangerous waters to save soldiers. I learned how pilots, they were escorting the ships back and forth, and they were also getting into dogfights in the air with their aerial opponents, and how soldiers were covering and assisting each other as they retreated back to the Dunkirk beaches to survive. Some really important information that I obtained was understanding the consequences of Dunkirk. It was more than saving stranded troops. It gave Britain hope when things seemed lost and hopeless. This hope fueled the determination to continue fighting for righteousness against the Nazis, and even if the odds were against them, they had to fight because it was their only choice. And Dunkirk fueled the need to fight. It fueled British nationalism, right? And so it's a reminder that history isn't only about battles, death tolls, and destruction, which it is a major part. It's about the people who sacrificed and fought to shape it, and the politics and the context behind it. Lastly, it made me think about how the evacuation of Dunkirk is praised, but this book displays the raw reality, the fear, the losses, the context. It helped me comprehend the event from numerous viewpoints. And so we're going to get on with the dramatic reading. So while reading this book, I discovered a really important passage that really stuck with me. And as mentioned in my dialectical journals numerous times, it follows the history created by the little ships, which were civilian vessels and volunteers who challenged death to safely return the soldiers back to England. They sailed on their little vessels and answered Britannia's call for help. It wasn't required of them, and frankly, if it was me, you can bet that I'm not going anywhere near that kill zone. But their bravery and united attempts inspired me. The passage begins with page 165. So, it follows the account of a young man who was barely an adult at the time, and how he risked his life going into Dunkirk to save men. So, this is Joshua Levine talking with the man. One of these young men was a 17-year-old Jim Thorpe. As I write, Jim is almost certainly the last man alive to have gone over to Dunkirk on one of these little ships. Born in November 1922, he now lives in Maryland in the United States. When I spoke with him in late March 2017, he explained that his brother Arthur was a boating enthusiast who lived alongside the river Thames. In late May 1940, Arthur got in touch asking Jim for help. "What do you need?" asked Jim. "I need a man like you for the weekend," said his brother. When the time came to leave, Jim still had no idea where they were going. "We're going to help someone," is all that Arthur would say. But the weather was good, and Jim arrived safely on the French coast, surrounded by many other boats. He was impressed by the number of soldiers on the beaches, and the fact that they were queuing up to their chests in water. They took the boat as far inshore as they dared, and shut off the engine. Immediately, men started trying to board. "It was a little bit on the frantic side," says Jim. "There were a lot of people trying to get in at the same time, so I would say, 'Wait a minute, wait a minute.' Once the men were on board, Jim would tell them where to go, pushing them up front and clearing the back of the boat so that the... Jim remembers traveling across the channel numerous times. He recalls German aircraft strafing the boat and the soldiers on board firing back with their rifles. But did he realize the importance of the job he was doing? No, you don't think about that sort of thing. You think about, just get those men. They were trying to do something for us, you think. Let's get them out." So far in our story, we've encountered various kinds of little ships and their personnel, but in the improvised and tumultuous environment of Dunkirk, there were some very strange vessels on the water, crewed by a remarkable range of individuals. As Robert Newborough was sailing away from Dunkirk in his fleet air-armed vessel, he spotted a canoe going the other way. "What the hell are you doing?" shouted Newborough. "I can take another," explained the canoeist. But perhaps the least reassuring mode of transport in the channel was observed by the master of the stream yacht, S.Y. Killarney. He sailed past a French officer and 2 Belgian soldiers attempting to reach England on a door. Yeah, like a door, like a door, like open door. And balancing on the door between the 3 soldiers were 6 large bottles of wine. So that's just a really cool passage that I found. So why did I choose this passage? Well, I chose this passage because it captures the selflessness of ordinary people like Jim Thorpe, who didn't view themselves as heroes, but made a huge impact, not only for the soldiers, but for history as a whole. They're embedded into books and memorized for their service, but their focus was simply saving lives, without thinking about the bigger picture. It shows the kind of courage that I truly admire, and how these young men, who were almost the same age as the soldiers, and only 2 years older than I am today, they risked their lives, boating across the British Channel to save more lives of the soldiers. So, evaluation of the text. I would recommend Dunkirk, The History Behind the Major Motion Picture by Joshua Levine, to anyone who's interested in World War II and, I guess, the human nature side of history. The book focuses on varieties of topics, it dives into experiences of those involved, and it also gives us the perspective of leaders being the mastermind behind the strategical points of it, and lots of facts about history. This book, it's like a machine feeding information into my brain, and I like that about it. That being said, I found some parts a bit slow because there's a lot of detail, and sometimes it feels boring without a set storyline, because it follows short storylines, and it follows the stories of soldiers who are just passing through, and many stories, to be honest. It's just insane. It doesn't follow a specific main character because it's like a documentary and a book combined, and it recounts the accounts of soldiers. ordinary soldiers who were just trying to survive and escape with their lives. And so it's really worth it if you stick with it, right? Levine's writing style is simple but meaningful. It really opened my eyes about how Dunkirk shaped the war and how it's remembered today. However, if you're looking for a plot narrative, this story might not be for you, because it's a detailed exploration of Dunkirk. You dive into the deep, deep. You dive into the deep. It's more of a detailed exploration of Dunkirk, and it dives into accounts and the history, the context behind what happened during the evacuation. It follows the strategy behind it, the documentary-like book instead of a fast-paced story. But still, it's an amazing, informative book, and it leaves you with a deeper understanding of what it's like for people who have lived through such a pivotal moment in history. It does feature images, so this is some images of the movie actually, and the movie actually does follow a bunch of soldiers, and the movie is actually quite different from the book, because the book actually dives into the history behind Dunkirk, right? But the movie, it just follows soldiers who are trying to escape by hiding onto the vessel of a boat or something like that. And in the movie, it also shows the RAF, the Royal Air Force, patrolling and trying to shoot down any planes, any Bf-109 fighters who are trying to aim for the ships leaving the Dunkirk port for England. And it's very interesting because in real life, these are real photos. This is an RAF plane that's escorting a warship back to England for safety because of the amount of bombers and Stukas. Stukas are basically dive bombers. They would go down and shoot at the ships and dive up again, and their damage was massive, And these guys, they would have to escort them. And here you can see the line of soldiers. This is you can obviously tell it's a lot, but in reality it's 300,000 soldiers, right? In here it's a picture. It's a picture of the movie, and same here, that's the movie, but it does follow the account of the real life story. And here you can see that they are taking cover from enemy shelling, from artillery from far away, and from bombs dropped by the airplanes. And this is the port where the soldiers would leave. It's called the Mole. And it's crazy how every day you just imagine yourself trying to get home, and you're getting closer and closer without knowing if you're actually going to get home safely, because it's crazy. And here are soldiers. These are soldiers in the water. They're trying to get out. They're trying to swim the waters to get to the ship. And this is a civilian vessel right here, and these guys, they're holding multiple dozens of soldiers on it, trying to get them home. And finally, this is the Mole. This is the dock where soldiers would line up and wait for hours, days, and days. This is Joshua Levine standing next to an artillery gun on the beaches of Dunkirk.